start. Slide is visible or not? Is the slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So today we'll discuss two topics. Number one, the first topic is coronary circulation. Okay, coronary circulation. So what is coronary circulation? It is the circulation of blood in the blood vessels that supply the heart muscles, or not only the heart muscles, even other structures of the heart. Okay, so earlier we talked about so many times that the blood is pumped out of the heart. Okay, so the chambers of the heart, they are filled with the blood, and it will be pumped out, and it will be filled with again the blood. Okay, all those things we have already discussed. Okay, but in case of coronary circulation, these are the blood vessels which is supplying the tissues of the heart, we can say. Okay, they are supplying the tissues of the heart. Okay, so coronary circulation is a part of systemic circulation. Coronary arteries, okay, coronary arteries supply oxygenated blood to the heart muscle and other components of the heart. So just like other circulatory system, this coronary arteries also, it is carrying oxygenated blood. Okay, and then it supplies this oxygenated blood to the heart muscles and other components of the heart, like those the fibrous tissue of the heart, or as well as those septums. Okay, those septa, they are also supplied with the blood. Okay, which is coming from the coronary arteries. Okay, just excuse me 1 minute. So what about the coronary veins or cardiac veins? So they drain away the blood once it has been deoxygenated. That means they are carrying the deoxygenated blood. Okay, so you know that in this diagram you can see the heart structure is here. Okay, structure of heart is here, which is showing coronary circulation. Okay, so these blood vessels, they are supplying the tissues of the heart. Okay, and there are the arterial system as well as the venous system. Okay, just like other circulatory system, the arteries, they carry oxygenated blood, and the venous system, it is carrying the deoxygenated blood. Okay, now let's see first the coronary arteries. Okay, there are two main coronary arteries which are arising from the aorta just above the aortic semilunar valve. Okay, now you see the first diagram. Okay, here I have edited it. So you see number one is the right coronary artery. Okay, here you see the right coronary artery. So we know that this big artery, it is the aorta. Okay, and here I'm drawing the aortic valve. Okay, semilunar valve, you know that is aortic semilunar valve. Okay, so this just above the aortic semilunar valve. Okay, that's it. Two main coronary arteries are there. This one is the right coronary artery, and another one here you can see, this is the left one. Okay, so just above the aortic valve, okay, they are opened into the aorta. Okay, so these two are the main coronary arteries, right and left. Okay, so in the second diagram you can see here. So this is the middle one. Okay, so this is the aortic valve. Okay, So here opening, this is the left coronary artery. Here it is the hole also you can see here. This is the opening of the left coronary artery just above the aortic valve. And here you see this is the opening of the right coronary artery. Here you can see artery, it is coming out like this. Okay, so we can say that sometimes blood is coming from the aorta into the arteries, okay, during systole, okay, but during diastole, the blood will come from the coronary artery and they will drain into the aorta, okay. During relaxation, the pressure here it will be higher so that they will drain into the aorta, okay. So as I told you, during diastole, the increased aortic pressure above the valves forces the blood into the during diastole, the increased aortic pressure above the valves forces blood into the coronary arteries and then into the musculature of the heart. So what does it mean? You see again the first diagram. Okay, here I'm drawing this yellow color arrow structure. You can see or not? This one? Can you see this area? Hello? Anyone can see? Oh, okay. Can you see this diagram? Okay. Actually, this is the direction of blood flow. Okay. Direction of blood flow during diastolic period. Okay. During diastolic period, you know that the pressure inside the aorta is higher than the pressure inside the ventricle. Okay. So in this condition, blood will try to flow back towards the ventricle. Here, blood will move towards the ventricle. But you know that blood will not be entering the ventricles because of the closure of aortic valve. Okay, because of closure of aortic valve. But regarding the right coronary artery and left coronary artery, okay, some blood now they will enter into the right coronary artery and left coronary artery. Although this aortic valve is closed during diastole, okay, but blood can enter these two coronary arteries so that this blood will be distributed to the tissues of the heart. Okay, so this is happening during diastole. Okay, let's say when there is systole. Systole is there. Systole means these ventricles, it will, it will contract. So blood will be forced out like this. So in that condition, this right and left coronary artery, they will also be compressed. Okay, so blood may also come out from them. Okay, but my point. So regarding the cardiac cycle, you have to remember during diastole, blood enters the left and right coronary artery, but during diastole, blood will be forced out of the coronary arteries. Okay, so the left coronary artery distributes blood to the left side of the heart. Okay, left coronary artery, this one, it will distribute blood to the left side of the heart, the left atrium and ventricle, and the interventricular septum. Okay, so left side of the blood, it is usually supplied with left coronary artery. Okay, what about the right coronary artery? This one. Okay, the right coronary artery distributes blood to the right atrium. Okay, right atrium, portions of both ventricles, right and left. Okay, and the heart conducting system. You know what are the heart conducting system? AV node, SA node, all those things. Okay, Pandilophy's node. Okay, so they will receive blood from the right coronary artery. Okay, and here another term comes here, coronary veins. Deoxygenated blood is returned to the chambers of the heart via coronary veins. So you know that here in the first diagram is showing only the arterial system. Okay, but in the second diagram, arterial system and venous system, they are shown, and you know that after the right coronary artery and left coronary artery, okay, is distributed to the what to say, tissues of the heart. Okay, after some time they will become smaller arteries, arterioles, and then again capillaries will be there. So after capillaries, the venous system starts. Okay, the venous system will start, and you know that the venous system, they will collect deoxygenated blood. Okay, and they will return this deoxygenated blood to the chambers of the heart via coronary veins. Okay, coronary veins are there. Okay, venules will be there, small veins will be there, larger veins, and then coronary veins. And you know that most of these veins converge to form coronary venous sinus. We can say that this is the largest veins, the largest vein in the coronary circulation. So here you can see in the second diagram, you can see this is the coronary sinus. Okay, so this will drain that blood into the right atrium. Okay, it will drain blood into the chambers of the right atrium. Okay, is it clear or not this? It is very simple. The circulatory system in the heart, let's say it is coronary circulation. It is having two main arteries, right and left. Okay, and then you know that how arteries are distributed in a tissue. Okay, they will be divided into smaller arteries, and then ultimately it will become arterioles. Each arterioles again, it is divided into a number of capillaries. Number of capillaries join together and form the venule. A number of venules will form the small veins. Number of small veins will converge and form larger veins. And ultimately here in the coronary circulation, the largest vein which is drained into the right atrium is known as coronary sinus. So blood will be, deoxygenated blood will be drained into the right atrium. Okay, and then it will become again a part of the, the blood which is to be circulated in through the systemic or pulmonary circulation. Okay. So the heart normally extracts 70 to 75% of the available oxygen from the blood in coronary circulation. Okay. So when blood is passing through the coronary artery, okay, and then to the arterioles, and then capillaries. So through the capillaries, let's say around 70 to 75% of oxygen in the blood, okay, they will be delivered to the tissues of the heart. Okay, this is much more than the amount extracted by other organs from their circulation. That is 40% by resting skeletal muscle and 20% by the liver. So you can compare how much percentage of oxygen is extracted by a particular tissue. So the heart tissue is extracting around 70 to 75% of available oxygen in the blood. Okay, but you see, resting skeletal muscle, it is extracting only around 40%, and liver is extracting only 20% of oxygen available in the heart, in the blood. Okay, so you can see that the extraction percentage of heart tissue, okay, regarding oxygen available in the blood, it is very much higher than other tissues. Okay, obstruction of coronary artery. Okay, obstruction of coronary artery, depriving of the heart tissue of oxygen-rich blood leads to death of part of the heart muscle. That is the known as myocardial infarction in severe cases, and total heart failure, and that may ensue or that may occur. What does it mean is that when there is obstruction of the coronary artery, which is very common, okay, in elderly people, okay, it means that it will obstruct the flow of blood. Obstruction of flow of blood means sufficient amount of oxygen cannot reach the heart tissue, myocardium. So it will lead to death of those affected myocardium. Okay, in severe cases, this is known as myocardial infarction, and it is very dangerous. It may lead to total heart failure and death may occur. Okay. So what will happen in the coronary circulation during systole and diastole. Changes during systole and diastole. Okay. So I've already told you a little bit of this one also. Okay. Now let's see during contraction of the ventricular myocardium. That is during systole, contraction of the ventricles, the subendocardial coronary vessels. Okay, these subendocardial coronary vessels, they are the vessels that enter the myocardium, are compressed due to the high ventricular pressure. Okay, now let's see in this diagram what is this subendocardial coronary vessels. Okay, actually here you see the first diagram. Okay, so this is a cross section or longitudinal section of the heart. Okay, so you know that the myocardium, which is in contact with the endocardium. Okay, the part of the myocardium which is coming in contact with the myocardium. Okay, they are the subendocardial. The vessels which are present in this area, they are subendocardial coronary vessels. Let's say during this the second diagram. So you see, this is the lumen of, let's say, the ventricle. Okay, and here this is the endocardium. Okay, innermost layer of the heart is endocardium. Just above the endocardium, myocardium, let's say, starts. Okay, so let's say this area. Okay, I'm drawing here. The area which is closest to the lumen of the ventricle, these are the subendocardial portion. Okay, here blood vessels are there. Here blood vessels are shown here. You can see. Okay, these structures, they are the blood vessels. Okay, so you know that when there is contraction of the ventricles, okay, these blood vessels which are in the subendocardial region of the myocardium, okay, they are compressed. Here it is said compressed due to high ventricular pressure. So it is clear that when ventricle is contracting, okay, it tries to pump out blood out of it. So compression, okay, pressure will be exerted against the wall of the ventricle. Because of that, the blood vessels or subendocardial coronary blood vessels, they are compressed. Okay. Then this compression results in momentary retrograde blood flow. That is, blood flows backward towards the aorta, which further inhibits perfusion of myocardial during systole. So this is very clear. Now you see the second diagram here. Okay, second diagram you see. So you know that when there is compression, okay, let's say here compression is there. Okay, the ventricles, it is contracting. So that means that this left and right coronary artery, as well as other arteries or blood vessels, they are compressed. Okay, they are compressed because of the contraction of the ventricles. So you see that here the diagram I've shown you, this dark yellow color. That means during systole, the blood will be forced out of this artery. Okay, so they will drain into the aorta. Okay, that means momentary retrograde blood flow takes place during systole. Okay, because of the compression of the arteries, or we can say compression of the blood vessels of the coronary circulation. Okay, coronary blood vessels. Okay, so blood will force out of the blood vessels and they will drain into the aorta. So this is happening during systole. Okay, is it clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But now here another one is it. So you know that in the first diagram here I told you that the subendocardial blood vessels, they are compressed. Okay, they are compressed and they are not available for supply of the tissue, heart tissue. Okay, but on the other hand, if you see the other end, that is epicardial artery, the blood vessels which are present in this epicardial region. That means the myocardium. These are myocardium only, but the myocardium which are closest to the epicardium, the outer covering of the heart. Okay, they are not totally compressed. You see, however, the epicardial coronary vessels, that is the vessels that run along the outer surface of the heart. Okay, so here you see in this diagram. Okay, these are the epicardial coronary artery. Okay, that means they are just next to the, just internal to the epicardium. Epicardium is the outer covering of the heart. Okay, but the blood vessels here in this region, okay, they are not compressed, but remains open. Okay, because of this, blood flow in the subendocardial stop during ventricular contraction. As a result, most myocardial perfusion occurs during heart relaxation. Okay, heart relaxation, the stop with the subendocardial coronary vessels are open and under low pressure. Okay, so actually the outer portion, okay, here blood supply will still be there because epicardial coronary vessels, they are not compressed. Okay, but most of the myocardium, okay, during systole, okay, blood supply will not be there because of the compression of this subendocardial arterial blood vessels, okay, arterial vessels, okay. So they are compressed, so blood cannot enter the tissue of the heart. Is it clear or not? I think the way I explain it may not be easy to understand. Okay. Blood flow never comes to zero in the right coronary artery since the right ventricular pressure is less than the diastolic pressure. Okay, so you know that this one is that. So in this region, it does not mean that there is zero blood supply, but it is at minimal level. Okay, but you know that during diastole, okay, during diastole, when there is relaxation of the ventricular muscle, okay, now the pressure is low, okay, now the pressure is low. When pressure is low, you know that I've already shown you. So the pressure during diastole, the pressure in the aorta, okay, let's say in the aorta or pulmonary artery, it will be lower, okay, it will be lower. Okay, let's say we are talking about only the coronary circulation. That means we are talking about that coronary artery right and left. Okay, when relaxation of the heart is there. Okay, I've already shown you. The pressure here, it is higher. The pressure in the aorta is now higher, and then it will try to move blood towards the heart, okay, to the ventricles, okay. But as you know, as I told you, this backflow of blood, it will be prevented by the aortic valve, okay, so that blood will not flow into the ventricles. But at the same time, since this right and left coronary artery, since they are open, blood will flow through them. So during relaxation period or sorry, diastolic period, blood will enter the artery, the coronary arteries, so that supply of blood can take place to the tissues of the heart. Okay. So next is changes in tissue oxygen demand. Okay, changes in oxygen demand. Okay. The heart regulates the amount of vasodilation or vasoconstriction of the coronary arteries based upon oxygen requirements of the heart. So just like what we have discussed yesterday. Yesterday we talked about that when oxygen lack is there, vasodilation is taking place. But when there is excess of oxygen, contraction of the smooth muscle of the blood vessel takes place. That we have already discussed. Just like other circulatory system. In case of coronary circulation also, the same thing will happen. Okay. So the heart regulates the amount of the vasodilation or vasoconstriction of the coronary arteries based upon oxygen requirements of the heart. Okay. So failure of oxygen delivery caused by a decrease in blood flow in front of increased oxygen demand of the heart results in tissue ischemia. Okay. Suppose there is failure of oxygen delivery to the heart muscle. It is taking place, but the heart muscle is requiring high amount of oxygen. Okay, so in this condition, I've already told you that there will be that infarction. Okay, myocardial infarction. The area which is affected by that low oxygen, it will die. Okay, and it means that there is deficiency of oxygen. In this condition, it is known as ischemia. Okay, so brief ischemia is associated with intense chest pain known as angina. Okay, so suppose your heart muscle is
Sir, you are not
lack of oxygen, or there is low concentration or low level of oxygen. Okay, so it will lead to this chest pain. So this is because of deficiency of oxygen, and this condition is known as angina. Okay, that this is a brief duration. Suppose there is severe ischemia, that means low oxygen deficiency, which is severe. Okay, it can cause the heart muscle to die from hypoxia. That means it will lead to death of the heart muscle. That is, hypoxia means nothing but oxygen lack. Okay, and such as during myocardial infarction. So it is not said that this is myocardial infarction. Okay. So another condition is chronic moderate ischemia causes contraction of the heart to weaken, known as myocardial hibernation. So it means that when there is moderate deficiency in oxygen, okay, oxygen supply to the heart muscle, okay, so this will lead to weakening of contraction of the heart. Okay, weakening of contraction of the heart means it will lead to low cardiac output. That means sufficient amount of blood will not be delivered to the peripheral tissue, and this is known as myocardial hibernation. Okay, so it is very simple. Oxygen, as you know, around 70 to 75% of available oxygen in the blood, they are extracted by the heart muscle when blood is flowing through the heart muscle. Okay, 70 to 75% of oxygen they are delivered. That means high supply of oxygen is always necessary in the heart. That means through the coronary circulation. Okay. Otherwise, if there is deficiency, even moderate lack of oxygen, okay, it is significant. Okay. That means if it is severe, means it can lead to heart failure, all these things. Okay. We have already discussed. Okay. Now control of coronary blood flow. Control of coronary blood flow. Number one, local muscle metabolism is the primary controller of coronary blood flow. This one also we have discussed yesterday. Okay. So blood flow depends upon oxygen availability, or yesterday we talked about the rate of metabolism. Okay. So in case of coronary circulation, also the same thing is happening here. Local muscle metabolism is the primary controller of coronary blood flow. Okay. Blood flow through the coronary system is regulated mostly by local arterial vasodilation in response to nutritional needs of the cardiac muscle. Okay, so just like other tissue, what we have discussed yesterday. Okay, when there is increased nutritional needs by the cardiac muscle. Okay, so there will be vasodilation of the arterial system of the coronary circulation, so that more blood can enter the heart tissue. Okay, that is whenever the vigor of cardiac contraction is increased, the rate of coronary blood flow also increases. Okay, that means more metabolism, more action is there. So there is need of more blood flow. So yesterday also I gave you an example of skeletal muscle. At rest, the blood flow through the skeletal muscle is very low. Okay, it is around only 4 ml of blood per 100 gram of muscle tissue. But you see that when you do the intense physical activity, okay, it can increase to 80 ml. Okay, just like that, in case of cardiac muscle also, suppose if you do exercise, your heart rate increase, the intensity of contraction is increased. Okay, in that condition, more blood is required. Okay, by the muscle of the heart. Okay, so local dilation of the vasodilation will take place. Okay. Conversely, decreased heart activity is accompanied by decreased coronary blood flow. Okay. So during sleep and all, our heart it is working at minimal level. In that condition, blood flow to the coronary artery or coronary blood vessels will decrease. This local regulation of coronary blood flow is almost identical to that occurring in many other tissues of the body, especially in the skeletal muscles. Okay. Now, so increased activity is causing increased blood supply to the heart muscle, but decreased activity of the heart is decreasing blood supply to the heart muscle. Okay, you already know that one. So another one here, oxygen demands as a measure factor in local coronary blood flow regulation. Okay, just now I told you that when there is increased activity of the heart muscle, there is increased blood flow. Okay, it should increase the blood flow. So this is because of increased oxygen demand. Okay, by the muscle tissue. Okay, so oxygen, its demand for oxygen has increased. Okay, when there is increased activity of the heart muscle. Okay, blood flow in the coronary arteries usually is regulated almost exactly in proportion to the need of cardiac musculature for oxygen. Okay, this I've already repeated so many times. When there is increased activity by a particular tissue like cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle, okay, it means that there is increased demand for oxygen. So increased demand can be met with what? Increased blood flow. Okay, when there is increased blood flow, more oxygen can be delivered to the tissue. Okay, normally about 70% of oxygen in the coronary blood is removed. So I already told you 70 to 75% they are extracted. Okay. Because not much oxygen is left, very little additional oxygen can be supplied to the heart musculature unless a coronary blood flow increases. Okay, so under normal condition, you know that 70% to 75% of oxygen from the coronary circulation is extracted by or utilized by the heart muscle. Okay, so only 30% remains. Okay, they are not utilized, which is available in the blood. Okay. But here you see, because not much oxygen is left, that is 30%, very little additional oxygen can be supplied to the heart muscle unless the coronary blood flow increases. Until and unless there is increase in the blood flow, that it is difficult to supply extra oxygen to the working heart muscle. Okay, so that means that there should be increased blood flow. Fortunately, the coronary blood flow does increase almost in direct proportion to any additional metabolic consumption of oxygen by the heart. Okay, it means that whenever there is increase in the activity of the muscle, there is increased amount of oxygen. Okay, but this is accomplished by increased blood flow in the coronary blood vessels. Okay, instantaneously. Okay. However, the exact means by which increased oxygen consumption causes coronary dilation has not been determined. Okay, it is speculated by many research workers that a decrease in oxygen concentration in the heart causes vasodilator substances to be released from the muscle cells and this dilate the arteries. This we have already discussed in this chapter. Okay, when there is decrease in the oxygen concentration in the blood vessel, okay, there is a release of vasodilator substances, and these vasodilator substances act on the smooth muscle of the blood vessels, and they dilate the blood vessels. Dilation of the blood vessel means more blood can flow through this one. You all know this one. So yesterday we have already discussed this one. A substance with great vasodilator propensity is adenosine. Okay. So adenosine is a good vasodilator. In the presence of very low concentration of oxygen in the muscle cells, a large proportion of ATP degrades to adenosine monophosphate. Okay. Then small portion of these are further degraded and release adenosine in the tissue fluids of the heart muscle. The result is increase in local coronary blood flow. Okay. So the meaning of this one is that when there is low oxygen concentration in the coronary circulation, okay, it will cause release of the vasodilator substances. One of them is adenosine. Okay, but adenosine is not directly released like that, so it has to be broken from the ATP. Okay, and then ultimately adenosine will produce, and this adenosine, as you know, it will act on the smooth muscle of the coronary blood vessel, and it will dilate. After dilation, more blood will flow through the blood vessel, so that the heart muscle they can receive higher amount of oxygen. Okay. After dilation causes vasodilation, much of it is reabsorbed into the cardiac cells to be reused. Okay, adenosine is not the only vasodilator product that has been identified. Others include, okay, just now I told you adenosine. So there are also other vasodilator substances such as adenosine phosphate compound, potassium ions, hydrogen ions, carbon dioxide, prostaglandins, and nitric oxide. Okay, so the second one, nervous control of the coronary flow. Okay, stimulation of the autonomic nerves to the heart can affect coronary blood flow both directly and indirectly. Okay, when you stimulate the autonomic nerves, which is the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, it can affect coronary blood flow directly and indirectly. Okay, the direct effects result from action of the nervous neurotransmitter substances acetylcholine, which are released from the parasympathetic nervous system or vagus nerve, and norepinephrine and epinephrine from the sympathetic nerves on the coronary blood vessels. Okay, so the indirect effect results from secondary changes in coronary blood flow caused by increased or decreased activity of the heart. Okay, so the direct effect will be caused by the release of the neurotransmitter by vagus nerve or sympathetic nervous system, and indirect effect will take place. Okay, that it will change the coronary blood flow caused by increased or decreased activity of the heart. Okay, the indirect effect play a far more important role in normal control of the blood flow that we see. The sympathetic stimulation, which releases norepinephrine and epinephrine, increases both heart rate and heart contractility and increase the rate of metabolism of the heart. Okay, so now here it is clear. When there is stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, there will be release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, at the heart muscles, and this will increase both heart rate and heart contractility. That we have already discussed when we talk about control of heart contraction. Okay, long that we have already discussed, and increases the rate of metabolism of the heart. Okay, in turn, the increased metabolism of the heart set of local blood flow regulatory mechanism for dilating the coronary blood vessels, and the blood flow increases approximately in proportion to the metabolic needs of the heart muscle. It means that when there is increased metabolism of the heart, I've already told you so many times, there will be dilating mechanism take place in the coronary blood vessels, so that blood flow will increase. Okay, in contrast, vagal stimulation with its release of acetylcholine slows the heart and has a slight depressive effect on the heart contractility. Okay. On the other hand, when there is release of acetylcholine from the parasympathetic nervous system, this acetylcholine will have a depressive effect on heart contractility. These effects in turn decrease cardiac oxygen consumption and therefore directly constrict the coronary arteries. So it is clear that this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, they are having the opposite action. Okay, so instead of dilating it, vagal stimulation will constrict the arteries of the coronary circulation. Okay, the distribution of parasympathetic vagal nerve fibers to the ventricular coronary system is not very great. However, the acetylcholine released by parasympathetic simultaneously directed to dilate the coronary arteries. There is much more extensive sympathetic innervation. Okay, so we'll just, this one though we've already discussed long back. Okay, all this thing, we just have to go somewhat fast. Okay, the sympathetic transmitter substances such as norepinephrine and epinephrine can have either vascular constrictor or dilator effect. Okay, depending upon the presence or absence of the constrictor or dilator receptors in the blood vessels. Okay. So here another important point is that there can be, depending upon the type of receptors, okay, there may be dilation or constriction. The constrictor receptors are called alpha receptors and dilator receptors are called beta receptors. Okay. Both alpha and beta receptors exist in the coronary vessels. In general, epicardial coronary vessels have preponderance of alpha receptors, whereas the intramuscular arteries may have a preponderance of beta receptors. So it means the outside portion of this one, they used to have epicardial portion, they have alpha receptors, and the inside one, the internal part, okay, they used to have the beta receptors. Therefore, sympathetic stimulant can at least theoretically cause slight overall coronary constriction or dilation, but usually constriction. Okay. Okay, now fetal circulation. It is a very short topic. We'll discuss it again. Okay, fetal circulation means the circulation in the fetus during pregnancy, or we can say during fetal life. Okay, so lungs are mainly non-functional during fetal life, and liver is only partially functional. So we can say that during fetal life, lungs, it is not expanded because the respiration has not taken place. Okay, lungs are mainly non-functional, we can say during fetal life because respiration is not there. But still there is blood supply to the lungs. Okay, because lung tissue, they have to grow or they have to maintain their metabolism also. But it is, we can say mainly non-functional means they do not do that respiratory function. Okay. Another one is that liver is only partially functional. Even liver is not that functional, it is partially functional. Okay. So because of this, it is not necessary for the fetal heart to pump much blood. Okay. Not necessary to pump much blood through either the lungs or the liver. So you already know that when there is increased metabolic rate in a particular tissue or organ, okay, more blood supply, higher blood supply is required. Okay, but when they are not metabolically active, less blood will flow through them. Okay, just like that, during fetal life, lungs and liver also, they are functioning, let's say, at minimal level. That means they do not need much blood supply or more blood supply, okay, to do their function. That means minimal amount of blood flow through the lungs and liver during fetal life. Okay. However, the fetal heart must pump large quantities of blood through the placenta. Okay, placenta, we all know that this is the covering of the fetus during the pregnancy. So through the placenta only, the fetus is getting nutrients and it is removing waste material also through placenta. Okay, that is why placenta should receive large amount of blood supply. Okay. Therefore, special anatomical arrangement cause the fetal circulatory system to operate much differently from that of the newborn animals. We'll just go fast. We have only 10 minutes. Okay. So now let's see. This is the fetal circulation, the anatomical structure of the blood vessels of the fetus. Okay, it is quite different. Now let us trace it. Okay, let's see. Blood returning from the placenta through the umbilical vein. Okay, here you see this diagram. This is the umbilical vein which is coming from the placenta. Okay, then it passes through the ductus venosus. Okay, so this umbilical vein, it is passing through the ductus venosus. You know that this is carrying oxygenated blood. Okay, and then what will happen is that it is mainly bypassing the liver. Okay, it will bypass the liver, mainly bypass the liver, and most of the blood entering the right atrium from the inferior vena cava. Now, this ductus venosus, it will drain blood into this inferior vena cava. Here you can see, this is the inferior vena cava. Okay, and it is in a straight pathway across the posterior aspect of the right atrium and through the foramen ovale directly into the left atrium. Okay, now this is the inferior vena cava, and this is the opening of the inferior vena cava into the right atrium. Okay, so from after entering the right atrium, the blood will directly usually pass through the left atrium. Here you can see this is the foramen ovale. So this is the opening. Okay, the opening between the right and left atrium. So after birth, this is not present, or we can say it will close. Okay, but during fetal life, this is open, so it will directly pass blood into the left atrium. Okay, thus the well oxygenated blood from the placenta enters mainly the left side of the heart rather than the right side and is pumped by the left ventricle mainly into the arteries of the head and forelimbs. Okay, so you just see it is very different. Okay, let's see from the placenta. I'll just from the placenta, blood is coming through the umbilical vein and it passes through the ductus venosus, and this is bypassing the liver, and it will drain into the inferior vena cava and into the right atrium. From the right atrium directly, blood will pass through the foramen ovale. This is our opening between right atrium and left atrium. Okay, so after birth, as you know, this is not present. Okay, so that this blood will enter the left atrium and then into the ventricles, left ventricles. Okay. Then the blood entering the right atrium from the superior vena cava is directed downward through the tricuspid valve into the right atrium. So now let's see superior vena cava. Okay, superior vena cava, blood coming from the upper part of the body. Okay, now it is entering the right atrium and then directly into the right ventricle. Okay, The blood is mainly deoxygenated, that I'll not repeat. Now it is pumped by the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery. Okay, now same thing will take place just like adult. Now it is pumped through the pulmonary artery. Okay, and then mainly through the ductus arteriosus. Now another term comes here, which is not observed in adult, ductus arteriosus. Okay, so this ductus arteriosus is nothing but the blood vessel artery which will drain into the, descending aorta. So this is the aorta. Okay, so in adult we have not observed this one. Okay, ductus arteriosus, it is not present. Okay, so this will go directly to the lungs only in adult. But here during fetal life, this ductus arteriosus, it will drain blood into the aorta. Okay, it will drain into the aorta. Here you can see, and then follow umbilical arteries. Okay, and this will go again towards the placenta. Okay, so here we have what we have: ductus venosus, foramen ovale, and ductus arteriosus. Three things are there. Number one, ductus venosus. Number two, foramen ovale. And number three is the ductus arteriosus. So this is quite different. You already know what is the structure of the heart, how pulmonary artery comes out, how aorta has come out of the heart. You already know that. But in case of during fetal life, these are extra structure, we can say, okay, which is changing the direction of blood flow. Okay, so this is happening during the fetal life. Okay, we just go fast. 55% of all the blood flows through the placenta, leaving only 45% to pass through all the tissues of the fetus. So you know that the blood passing through the placenta, it is 55%. It is very high. Okay, this it is coming from the mother only. Okay, and rest will receive only 45% of blood. Okay, furthermore, during fetal life, only 12% of blood flows through the lungs. Okay, will not be. So changes now. All those ductus arteriosus, ductus venosus, and foramen ovale. Okay, they will be removed after. But let us see that one. Okay, changes in the fetal circulation at birth. Okay, so there will be decreased pulmonary and increased systemic vascular resistance at birth. Okay, so the primary changes in the circulation at birth include, okay, first there is loss of tremendous blood flow through the placenta, because why there is loss of blood flow through the placenta? After birth, umbilical cord will be cut. That means blood will not flow through the placenta, we can say. Okay, this increases the aortic pressure as well as the pressure in the left ventricle and left atrium. Okay, so when there is cut off of this placenta, okay, when this is cut off, that means there will be increase in the aortic pressure. Okay, and even the pressure in the left atrium and left ventricle, it will increase. Okay, pressure will increase. Okay, because of cutting off of the blood supply to the placenta. Okay, now the second one is that the pulmonary vascular resistance greatly decreases as a result of the expansion of the lungs. In the unexpanded fetal lungs, the blood vessels are compressed because of the, okay, before that, what I want to say here is that now this the pulmonary circulation, okay, the pressure inside the pulmonary artery, it will decrease. Okay, it will decrease. Earlier during fetal life, it is high. Okay, but after birth, it will decrease. Then what will happen is that in the unexpanded fetal lungs, the blood vessels are compressed because of the small volume of the lungs. Even during fetal life, okay, blood vessels in the lungs, they are compressed. Okay, so that you have to remember also. Immediately on expansion, these vessels are no longer compressed and the resistance to blood flow decreases several fold. So the point is that when a person or an animal is born, immediately what the newborn will do is that respiration. Okay, it will do respiration. When the first respiration takes place, what will happen is that the lung will expand. Lung is just like a balloon. Okay, the lung will expand. So the pressure inside the lung, it is decreasing. The pressure inside the lung, it is decreasing, so that the blood which is coming through the pulmonary artery, they can also pass through several blood vessels which was compressed during fetal life. Okay, now they can pass through there. So because of that, this will decrease the pulmonary pressure also. Okay. Also in fetal life, the hypoxia of the lungs causes considerable tonic vasoconstriction of the lung blood vessel. Again, during fetal life, there will be hypoxia. Okay, because this hypoxia means less oxygen supply is there because respiration has not taken place, and this is causing again vasoconstriction of the blood vessel of the lungs. Okay, but vasodilation takes place when aeration of the lungs eliminates the hypoxia. All these changes together reduce the resistance through blood flow through the lungs as much as 5-fold. Okay, this reduces the pulmonary arterial pressure, right ventricular pressure, and right atrial pressure. Okay, so the point is that after birth, we have to know that the aortic pressure increases, but pulmonary pressure decreases because of expansion of the lungs. Okay, that you have to remember. Okay, so we almost finished. Within 5 minutes, we'll finish. Closure of the foramen ovale. So you already know that foramen ovale is an opening which is passing blood from the right atrium into the left atrium. Okay, but this has to be closed after some time after birth. Okay, so the lower right. The thing is that after birth, you know that here you see in this diagram, blood is flowing from. This pressure is now increased. Okay, after birth, you know, this pressure is increased because of increased left atrial pressure, left ventricle, and even aortic pressure is also increased. Okay, so the increase of this pressure will try to cause backflow of blood from the left atrium into the right atrium. Okay, but you have to remember that there is a valve. Okay, this valve will close over here so that it will prevent backflow. Okay, it will close over. This is a valve. Okay, we will have to go fast. Okay, so it will close this, and what will happen is that in 2/3 of all people, the valve becomes adherent over the foramen ovale within few months or few years and forms a permanent closure. So after within few months or few years, this permanent closure will take place. But this is common. Is that there used to be some problem in some individuals. Okay, so it remains open like that. But usually it will close by itself. Okay, so I'll not repeat. What about the closure of the ductus arteriosus? Okay, closure of ductus arteriosus. So you see that here. Okay, this is coming from the pulmonary artery into the aorta. Okay, so this will also close. So this is because of, you see that the ductus arteriosus also closes, but for different reasons. First, the increased systemic artery resistance elevates the aortic pressure, while the decreased pulmonary resistance reduces the pulmonary arterial pressure. That means the blood flow through this area, it will decrease because here pulmonary artery has decreased its pressure. Okay, but at the same time, the aorta, okay, it has increased its pressure. So it will try to push blood back towards the pulmonary artery. Okay, as a consequence of the blood begins to flow backward from the aorta into the pulmonary artery through the ductus arteriosus rather than, okay, that I've already told you. However, after only a few hours, the muscle wall of the ductus arteriosus constricts. So constriction will take place here. Okay. So you see, after few hours after birth, okay, this area it will constrict, okay, and it will stop blood flow. This is called, okay, all this thing. Then during the next 1 to 4 months, the ductus arteriosus ordinarily become anatomically occluded by the growth of fibrous tissue. That means that because of growth of this one, this will be occluded. Okay, the ductus arteriosus, it will be occluded. Okay, so occlusion will take place so that blood will not flow from the pulmonary artery into the aorta. Okay, closure of the ductus venosus. Okay, so you know that this one will also close. Okay, so in fetal life, the port of blood from all these things. Okay, so you know that immediately after birth, blood flow through the umbilical vein ceases, but most of the port of blood still flows through the ductus Okay, first thing on it. So you just remember, within 1 to 3 hours, the muscle wall of the ductus venosus contract strongly and closes the avenue of flow. Okay, so this within 1 to 3 hours, this constriction will be there, and it will stop the blood flow. Okay. Okay, this for today. I did not specify it properly, but I hope you do understand. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.